Okay, ready? Okay, good morning. Okay, we're in the middle of our series of Nevuah, Ruach HaKodesh, Pascal, all the different ways of finding out things, indirectly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Today I wanted to move on to the sugya of Chalemus. Chalemus is another one of these, like the pasuk says, Mefurish b'Chalem adaber bay. One of the methods that Hashem uses to discuss things or to inform people of His upcoming plans is b'Chalem adaber bay. He talks through a Chalem. So there's two parts to the sugya of b'Chalem adaber bay, and I think we're going to have to break it up into two bits. There's the sugya of Ter Lab Bashemayim, meaning like paskening based on a Chalem, learning dinim based on a Chalem. We're going to save that for a different time. We're going to put that aside. And then there's the other sugya of Stam. Are Chalemus actually full of wisdom and knowledge, or are Chalemus mostly full of total foolishness and not information? Are Chalemus sometimes yes, sometimes no? Meaning, what exactly is your average Chalem that you dream that has something pertinent to daily life? Is it meaningful? Is it meaningless? That's the part of the sugya that I want to start with. Now, I want to start with, essentially, there's a tshuva from the Tashbitz that really gives like the whole rundown of this in a great way from top to bottom. But I want to start with a little bit of the background history of the people that the Tashbitz mentions in this tshuva. It makes the tshuva read a lot more interestingly. The Ilm is familiar that in 1492, all the Jews were kicked out of Spain. That's the Spanish Inquisition. Everybody knows about that. In 1492, the Jews were expelled from Spain. What's less common knowledge is that in 1391, 100 years prior to the Spanish Inquisition, is really when the riots and the expulsion of Jews from Spain began. In 1391, there was a power vacuum. The king Juan I died. His son, whose name I don't remember, was 11 years old when he took over the crown. There was a power vacuum. There was a conference of assistants who surrounded the king and were really running the show. And there was a very powerful and passionate priest by the name of Ferdinand Martin. He used this like power vacuum when there was a child king in power in the Spanish kingdom to run around to villages in the countryside, villages and cities, and whip up the Hamaynam, whip up the regular populace into a frenzy. And through his rousing speeches, he caused pogroms in 70 cities, 70 towns and cities in 1391. Thousands, certainly hundreds, probably thousands of people were killed. Tens of thousands more converted at that time already. So really the kernel, the seed of the beginning of the Spanish Inquisition starts 100 years prior in 1392 to very similar outcomes, meaning there was some who were Moshe Nefesh, there were some who went into hiding, there were some who actually openly converted. Rav Chizdai Kraskras writes about this. He lived at that era. He writes about it in a lot of detail. He writes, I'm not going to read from it, but he writes of all the towns that they conquered and how many people they killed in each one and how many people converted. And the whole Hishtalshalos, he writes on what day, the Hebrew day, the English day, it happened. He writes about this overwhelming tragedy that befell the Spanish Kilo. Now, in 1391, when this befell them, this was something that they could never have imagined. This was much greater. In hindsight, we know that the Spanish Inquisition, 100 years later, made this so nothing that it's forgotten even. But when it happened to them, this was a very big deal. Now, two of the famous Gedolim, who are actually from the Yeshvim Shur Rishon and the Meshivim, some of the biggest Meshivim, the biggest Chuvasvarim, were the Rabbanim in Spain at this time, who were both exiled from Spain. One of them is the Tashbitz, Rav Shimshon ibn Duran, Rav Shimshon ben Bar Tzemach Duran. He lived in the island of Majorca. He was exiled. He moves to Algeria. And a second one of these Gedolim is the Rivash, Rav Yitzchak Bar Sheshet, or Bar Pat. It's not clear what his last name was. Rav Yitzchak Bar Pat Bar Sheshet is the Rivash. Now the Rivash also was exiled from his city of Valencia and moved eventually to Algeria. So that it happened that in this little backward province of Algeria, where there was no parnasa and there was no organized lifestyle the way these Chachmei Sfarad were familiar with, meaning these were people who lived in cosmopolitan cities and had parnasas. The Tashbitz and the Rivash were both private citizens. The Tashbitz was a doctor, the Rivash was a seicher. They both worked for a living, were tremendous midacham. We have the Rivash left over, I think, 520 chuvas. The Tashbitz left over, I think, into the thousands. So they're both from the Gedolei HaMeshivim, Gedolei Olam, but they were people who were the leadership of Spain at that time in 1391, who were exiled to Algeria. Now, there's like a very interesting, I call it a shtus really, a legend, maybe a shtus, probably a shtus that's a legend about the Rivash. There's a Spanish historian, Dr. Joma Rira, I think his name was. Jomar Rira. It might even be, I don't even know if it's a he, maybe it's a she, I have no idea. A Spanish historian who did the research of the records in like the different towns that were attacked in 1391. And this historian concluded, based on records there, that the Rivash himself was baptized and converted for a year and a half. And for a year and a half lived as a Dominican friar in Valencia. Now, how did he get to this conclusion? Because he found an entry in one of the books that says that in Valencia a shul was attacked and all 250 people that were there and their Rav converted to Dominicanism and lived that way. Now, there's many holes in this story, and it's overwhelmingly more than likely that the Rivash is not the person who's being discussed in this entry. There's a lot of times that for example, there's a lot of times that the Rivash is mentioned in official documents from the government at that time. I mean, the Rivash was a prominent person, and he's mentioned in different government documents, and he's always mentioned by name. They knew who he was. He was a known, important person in town. He wasn't just a Rav of a shul that would be mentioned in that way. But this was like a rumor, a legend that was started by this person, and it's made it into the books about the Rivash. But in any case, the Rivash lived under very trying circumstances, one way or the other, and he eventually makes his way to Algeria. Now, in Algeria, him and the Tashbits both end up in the same kehillah, and they have tremendous respect for each other. There's a lot of cross-pollination between the two tshuvas. The Rivash and the Tashbits quote each other extensively in their tshuvas. They handle a lot of the same shilas that are relevant to both of them. But there's also a major flashpoint of contention between the Rivash and the Tashbits, and that is that the Rivash at some point was appointed by the government, got the position to be the dayan Behei HaYediyah, the dayan of the kehillah. Meaning what the government allowed him to do is that he was allowed to be dan yechidi. He could dan be the only judge on a case and dan because he's the dayan of the kehillah. As opposed to everyone else who needs to be like in a formal bezdin structure, he was allowed to dan individually. Now the Tashbits took great umbrage to this. The Tashbits writes a few tshuvas saying that dan yechidi is not allowed and etc. So even though they had a very respectful relationship, they had also like a fractious relationship in a certain way, the Tashbits and the Rivash in Algeria together. Now this is the background of a fascinating tshuva about dreams that I want to read you from the Tashbits. And in this tshuva is really everything that we need to know about the shiloh that we started off with, if dreams are important or not important, do they mean something, do they not mean anything? But this background makes the tshuva read a lot more interestingly, and I'll read for you now how. Now, out the gate we have to know that there's really, call it stiris in Chazal, in how to look at dreams. For example, and the Tashbits will bring all these things, there's stiris really in Chazal and in Dinim and Shulchan Aruch, because the Gemara in Brachos, for example, in the 9th parak, I'm sure everyone's familiar, has a big arichos to explain how dreams are supposed to be interpreted, what dreams mean, and it's blatter and blatter. It's like 3 blat explaining what all different types of dreams mean. Mitzat Sheni, you have the Gemara in Sanhedrin and the Flamed that says Chalemis shavi daber. Chalemis mean nothing. We bring a pasuk. Chalemis are meaningless. Chalemis don't mean anything. Now the Gemara. Now what's more important than that is that there's really a stira in dinim. Gepaskin to dinim and Shulchan Aruch that come from Gemara about Chalemis, and I'll tell you what that stira is. There's a Gemara in Gittin that says if a person's father dies and left over assets, and the person is unsure as to who those assets belong to or what belongs to other people, and he's not sure. And Achzile Bechalma, they showed him in a dream that this money belongs to so and so, and this money belongs to so and so. So the Gemara tells us, disregard it. Don't pay attention to it, because dreams don't mean anything. Meaning you're talking about a chayshim mishpat k'shayla, the guy is left with finances that he doesn't know how to allocate, he doesn't know where to distribute it to. A dream comes and tells him where it should belong to. The Gemara tells us, disregard the dream, chalemis shavi daber, they're not important. And that's like an important quote. That's the Gemara in Gittin. Now, the Gemara in Sanhedrin and the Flamed says it, the Gemara in Gittin, Daf Nun Beis says it, chalemis are not consequential. They don't move the needle one way or the other. Now, as always gepasket in Shulchan Aruch, in Shchei Mishpat, in Siman Reish and Hey, in Hilchos Matna Shchivira, when it talks about a person's, dying financial structure, the Shulchan Aruch paskins in Sif Tes, it says as follows: Haisa pikadon biyad aviyim. If there was a pikadon that was in the hands of the father, ve'eni yedeya heichan hinichu, and we don't know where the father left it. So meaning there's a teveya coming and saying, I left your father a pikadon that I never got back from him. And the Yerush says, I don't know. I have no idea where your pikadon is. I have no idea where it is. So says the Shulchan Aruch, v'amru le b'chaloim. And in a dream it was told to him, kach v'kach heim u'b'makim pleni heim. In a dream he was told, this is the money that's owed to that person and this is where it is. Says the Shulchan Aruch, u'matzav b'makim sh'amrulay b'minyin sh'namrulay, divrei chalemis le'maydlim v'le'meridin al hareim shalai. Says the Shulchan Aruch, and it's gepaskin in Shulchan Aruch like this, like the Gemara in Sanhedrin, like the Gemara in Gittin, that divrei chalaim is leimaylim v'leimeridin, and just disregard the chalaim. Even though it says clearly that these come, they're in a place or something, disregard it. Now, there's another din in Shulchan Aruch, gepaskin from a Gemara, that's a steer to this. The Gemara says in Nidarim, nidu b'chalaim. If a person was put into chayrim during a dream, meaning in a dream he saw himself being put into chayrim, so we say, it's a Gemara in Daf Ches, and Aleph, and Nidarim, it says, nidu b'chalaim tzarach yud b'nei adam lahatulay. You need 10 to be matter for you, because you're considered like you're in nidui. If someone got menuda in his dream, we treat it seriously, we treat it as if he's in nidui, and we say you need 10 people to be matter it. Now, what would you know? The Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Nidu v'chayrim, it's in Mishin Lamed in Yeridea, in Sif Lamed Hey. I'm sorry, not Sif Lamed Hey. In I forgot which Sif. The Shulchan Aruch says as follows: Nidu b'chaloim, havi nidu v'tzarach hatara. If a person got menuda in a dream, he was put into chayrim in his dream, it's considered a nidu and he needs hatara. So here you have more than just the steer like into Agadat the Gemara, so that one story that implies like this or another story that implies like this. You have two actual halacha Gemaras that are talking about halachas psukis, that are both gepaskin and Shulchan Aruch. One of them says divrei chalaim is leimaylim v'leimeridin, dreams are irrelevant, they don't matter. And one of them says nidu b'chalaim tzarach hatara. If a person gets in chayrim chalaim, he needs to have hatara. So you have mamash steer over here in halacha psuka in two different Gemaras. Now, additionally, you have many Gemaras themselves, like other Gemaras that go back and forth both ways. But those will give us a eitz already. Now, what's interesting is that essentially Rava in the Gemara in Brachos on Daf I think Nun Hey really addresses this openly. Rava says Chalaimis. He says as follows. Rava says, I'm sorry. The Gemara brings two readings of the pasuk. The Gemara says sometimes if a dream is good, you say Chalaimis shavi daberu with a question mark. Do Chalaimis speak falsehood? Meaning Chalaimis, of course, they're true. They mean something. But if a dream doesn't make sense or it's bad, you say Chalaimis shavi daberu. Chalaimis don't mean anything. Meaning you read the pasuk in both ways. Now Rava, it says Rava was conflicted about this. Rava said sometimes like this, sometimes like this. And Rava gives a yishuv. Rava says like this. I can't find the Gemara this second. Rava says, it's a one-liner. Rava, when he tries to be miyashiv the stira of if dreams are considered important or not important, Rava says, kana yedei malach, kana yedei shade. One's when the dream comes from a malach, and one's when the dream comes from a shade. There are two different types of dreams. There are dreams that come through malachim, dreams that come through shadim, and that is the distinction in which dreams are consequential, which dreams are not consequential. Now, it's important to keep in mind that many Rishonim, the Rambam, Berosham, but the Abarbanel, and Yitzchak Albo, and other Rishonim learn that kana yedei shade doesn't mean a shade mamish. It means, not mikori, not good dreams, whatever that means. Now, this is the background of the Gemaras that are relevant. Now let me read from this Tashbitz a little bit with all these different pieces, and we'll see a very nice work through in the whole sugya that the Tashbitz says. So the Tashbitz says as follows. He gets a shaila. It's in Chelik Beis in Tshuva, so the Tashbitz in Tshuva Kof Chav Chas. The Tashbitz gets a shaila like this. He says, I got a question. Someone had a dream. If the whole tzibur doesn't fast, but on a certain day, you menudim. Now this is a little bit more of a complex shaila of b'nidu b'chalayim. Someone got a dream that if all of you don't fast, I get a dream that if all of you don't fast next Tuesday, then you're all going to be in chayrim. That's the dream. This is the shaila that's presented to the Tashbitz. What to do with this chalayim? It says, V'hayra hamayra, the Rav who was asked the shaila paskim, ki chayavim le'esanas tainas tzibur. They're mechuyev to paskin a tainas tzibur. V'kavu bracha b'tfilas mincha, v'etiru minida b'asara. And they did both ways. They made a tainus with tfilas b'mincha, with laning and everything, and then they were also matir the nida just in case. Now, we don't know who the Rav is in this Tashbitz, in the shaila, the original question over here. It's possible that the shaila over here was the Meshiv, the Rav who was answering the shaila, was Gufa the Rivash. We have to see how this tshuva plays out. But we have the shaila that the Tashbitz is presented, which was asked and answered by someone else already. Now the Tashbitz is coming, so to speak, to review it, and he doesn't really agree. He says as follows. He says, I was taken aback, he says, Alamaisa. He says, this he starts with, either way they're making a mistake. Meaning, if they make them fast, then why are they doing a heter on the nidui? Because you're being mekayim the tanai. And if you don't make them fast, so like Manavshach, which way are you treating? He says, either way, clearly whoever was passing over here was making a mistake, he says. But he says, what's really worthy of looking into over here, he says, is, let's try to understand what are dreams in Chazal. What do Chazal really hold about dreams? He says, Ki ha'yediyah b'cholalim kaidem es b'teva, b'seid l'yediyah b'pratim. Fine. He says, Ki yesh mekayim shechachamenu zal. There are places where our Chachamim, the Chazal, chayshish and lahem, are very chayshish for dreams. V'yesh mekayim she'ein chayshish and lahem klal. And then there are places where Chazal seem to disregard it completely. It's worthy for us to dig down a little deeper and figure out what the reasons for these things are and try to understand it. To understand it with its proper value and what exactly it is will make us understand it better. If we don't really know what's going on over here, then we just have thoughts on the matter. We don't have actually a good sugya. So he says as follows. He starts off with the Gemara in Nedarim. There's a din of someone who is menuda b'chaloim, which is muskar in the first parak of Nedarim. The Gemara is in the end of Brachas in the 9th parak that we mentioned. Ubi Yavamas parak Isha Rabba Achziku Kana. There's another Gemara. It says clearly you see from those Gemaras that dreams were taken very seriously. They were considered to have deep meaning and they were taken seriously. There are places in Chazal where you're not chayshish at all. Come in Parak Zabeir, which is the Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Lamed that we quoted, that says Divrei Chalemus L'Maylam V'Lemiridin. The Gemara in Gittin that says the same thing. It says so. We have a stirum mefureshes in Chazal between these different sugyas, these different Gemaras. Sometimes you see dreams are being taken very seriously, like it, and sometimes you see dreams are being disregarded completely, and we're not passing them at all. He says so. I'll tell you the pshat. He says he brings the ani omer kimashem she marpa shever. What's going to really heal this question? This is a Gemara that's mentioned in the end of Brachas on Daf Nun and Beis. Rava. This is what Rava says. Rava Rami. Rava asked the Sira. The pasuk says Chaleim speak falsehood. The pasuk also says in a dream I'll speak to you. That's how Kadosh Baruch Hu communicates with Klal Yisrael. So Rava answered like Kasha, Kanai de Malach, Kanai de Shedim. This is Rava's answer. We quoted this Gemara. This is what Rava says. Rava says, Kanai de Malach, Kanai de Shedim. This is the answer. He says, Harei Shehem Zal, Chazal themselves, Nisayru v'ro, they themselves were omer on the Shaila, v'ro ki yesh chaleim esheroy lismech aleim v'lach shlem, v'yesh mehem she'em roy lismech v'lach shlem. There are dreams that are worthy of taking seriously and being chayshish for, and there are also dreams that are worthy of being disregarded. V'yesh mehem they shade, v'hem dvarim ke'ein fun. Now, so says the Rivash, a very interesting aside. What's the cutoff? How do you understand which one's which? He says as follows. First, he brings God very interesting. The Rivash was a doctor, and he brings from the science of the day. He says it's even though Chazal's words don't need any proving, but he says I'll bring you from the dream interpreters in the Arab world who said that there are dreams that come from deep-seated machshavas that are in a person's head, things that he knows are right. It's his subconscious talking. It's knowledge that he essentially has underneath that's just not being allowed to bubble forth, and that's like coming forth in a dream. That's Ayidei Malach, he says. And then there are dreams that are situational. You were exposed to something, you ate something wrong, you slept the wrong amount. That's considered Ayidei Shade. So that's how the Rivash brings it. And he says this is actually what the modern science of his day believed in. The Tashbitz, this is what the science that they believed in. He says, and even though Chazal don't need any rayas from science, but this is what they said. Now he says, what the Rivash says, it comes out like this. He says, it comes out that in every dream that you have, it's really a Safek HaShakal. It's 50-50. You don't know. Is this a dream that's the subconscious or the Malach or Hashem or whichever version you want to say it, that's talking to you, that's giving you an idea about something in the future or something that you need to know and therefore should be taken very seriously? Or is this something that's situational? You ate the wrong thing, you slept the wrong thing, you heard the wrong thing, you looked at the wrong thing. Something happened that planted a seed for a dream they shade into your head. It's really a suffix. You could never know. So says the Rivash, it kind of follows the regular rules of Sveikis and Kol Torah Kula. When it comes to Mammon, when it comes to paskening a shayla, Dinei Mammon is the question, the halach is Safek Mammon lahakol, because we go basa chazaka. Wherever the money is, that's where it stays. So it says if a person has money that he yarshin, and now he gets a dream that tells him some of this money really belongs to Pliny, it's 50-50. It's a Safek HaShakal. The guy could say, listen, Uki zil basa chazaka. This stays where the chazaka is. The chazaka is this stays by me. I don't have to shell out any money based on a dream. But nidu b'chalaim, which is an Indian of ruchniistic, it's a Safek sakana, you want to call it. It's a Safek isser. So by Safek Isser, the halach is, by Sveikis, we're machmer. Traditionally, if there's a Safek and you're not sure how to go to something that is a potential Isser, we're machmer about it if it's 50-50. Because you never know. And some even point out that the Chazal say, Chalemis are echad b'shishim shebenevuah, 1/60th. Now we know the ratio for bittul is 1 in 61. You have to have 60 times the amount. Chalemis are that 1% that's still there. It's not batal. So it's a Safek Isser. So says the Rivash, this is what Rava meant. And this is the yishuv to the Stiris HaSugis. You want to know when we take dreams seriously? When it's just isser, it's just you're worried about something, take dreams seriously because maybe they're revealing to you some knowledge that you wouldn't have otherwise known. But when it becomes to a chaysh mishpat, then you want to pass and take away money, disregard dreams. That's how the Tashbitz learns, learns the chilik between these two sets of dreams. Now, it's interesting to note, there's a Chuvas Rashba in Chelik Aleph and Kuf Lamed Beis, where the Rashba says, someone asked him if there's a chiyuv to fast when you have a bad dream. Because the Gemara says, in Tzisim and Shulchan Aruch, and I think Reish Lamed Aleph maybe, that if you have a bad dream, v'nafshei aguma, you should fast. So says the Rashba, and it's like a short Chuvah, the Rashba says, pay attention to the words. It says, Misha chalam chalaim, v'nafshei aguma alav. And you're having, tzitterai, and you're afraid about it. So then, Yisana, this is what you should fast about. Yisana vafilu b'Shabbos. But he says, the Rashba says, Minei obey in the Gemara, it's before it's not a chiyuv to fast when you have a chalaim. There's no chiyuv. You have a chalaim ra, you're mechuyev to fast. There's two components. You have a chalaim ra, v'nafshei aguma alav. You're worried. Then you fast. Fasting is the remedy. Meaning it's not a tzivah, it's not a din, it's not a klarazach. Now, here's the most interesting part of the tshuva. The Tashbitz gets to the end of the tshuva. He brings these different mahalchim. He actually brings the Gemara in Hurrius that we'll see if we have time to share. But says he as follows. At the end, mamash like an addendum. It's one paragraph. It says, V'da. Kizeh karav la'asrim shana. He says, 20 years ago, chalam chaloim, Chakun ben Abu. We have no idea who this is. But Chakun ben Abu had a dream. Asher hayoim, he says, today already, yatzal l'tar b'sra. He's already fry, Chakun ben Abu. He's not even from anymore. But what was his dream? He said, Sha'atzibur chayavim l'sanes shalish taniyas sheni v'chamishi v'sheni. Chakun ben Abu dreamed that if the Olam doesn't, the tzibur has to fast Monday, Thursday, Monday. He says, V'harav Reb Yitzchak bar Sheshes Zatzal, the Rivash, got the shayla chashash loy. He was chayshish for Chakun ben Abu, and he passed that the tzibur has to fast these tanesim. V'gadzer shalish taniyas. He made the tzibur fast these 3 tanesim. He says the Tashbitz, like asterisks, he says, I'll make an asterisk on this person. You see that this person, from the fact that he's totally fry now, it tells you that this guy was not up to such great stuff then already. He wasn't a great guy. And the Rivash should not have taken him so seriously on this. The tzibur was like embarrassed and like to follow the Rivash's psak. So the tzibur was like bashful to follow the Rivash's psak. They called it a tainis chalaim, like as a joke, like a tainis, like a silly tainis. We couldn't put a minion together to do kriyas atari for the tainis that the Rivash paskin. And the Rivash felt bad about that. He says, me myself personally, I fasted, even though I didn't agree with it. He's quoting from a Gemara that says, if someone, one of the Amorim said, I know I'm not a Kohen, but if my Chaverim told me to go Duchen, I'll listen to the Psak. He says, I felt silly about it, but I followed the Psak of the Rivash, like the Rivash says. Now, this is the Tashbitz telling you how he feels about dreams that tell you to fast and whatever, like he just, built up through this entire tshuva. But he says the Rivash, thought something different about this. Now, in the end, there's these 4 interesting lines. He says, Masha Hizki Karav Zalazeh. He says, maybe what made the Rivash paskin like this, even though I don't think this is the way to go, he says, Humasha Amar Lanu, people told us, Kiba Valencia, Ir Meladete, this city of Valencia, it's with a base, that's the Arabic spelling, but Valencia in Spain, where the Rivash was a Rav, and where there was forced conversions and deaths, and the Rivash had to escape and go to Algeria, Ir Meladete, Before the Hagzera, before that terrible day in 1391, someone came to him before the Hagzera, Shleimim Mitish, that's the guy's name. Va'amrle ligzer tainis. Someone came to the Rivash in his hometown of Valencia before this Gzeira. The Rivash, as a man in his 60s already at the time, and told him, Herzchain, something terrible is about to come. Be geyser Gzeira. I saw this. I know this. And why? He saw in his dream a tremendous fire in the Rav's house. In his dream, he kept seeing that the Rav's house was lit on fire. And the Rivash disregarded it. The Rivash said, it's nothing. It's not consequential. Ignore it. But the Rivash felt bad when he saw that most of it exactly happened as the dream described. He says it could be the Rivash 10 years later in Algeria when Chakun ben Abu stepped forward with a dream and said, you better fast, so there's going to be terrible repercussions. The Rivash had some history with it. The Rivash already experienced getting a dream that foretold of something terrible that would happen, ignoring it and watching it play out. So the Rivash made everybody fast when Chakun ben Abu came for a dream. As opposed to the Tashbitz, who suffered through very similar persecutions, he stood with what he said, that our dreams are no more than just a suffix, and therefore by dvarim that have to do with actual psak, you could disregard them. You want to be nafshe agumalav, you're worried about something, you want to pay attention to it, so fine, you could if you want to, you don't have to. Now, there's an interesting Gemara, we'll close with this, that Mamish, it's a fascinating Gemara, needs a lot of understanding what's going on over here, that really brings into focus these two postures when it comes to dreams. The Gemara tells us that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was the Nasi. This is the Tkufa right after the Churban. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, I believe, was a child Nasi, meaning he got the Shtetl as a very, very young man, and it was not a given that he would be a successful Nasi. It was the Nasius itself was under tremendous attack. It was after the Churban. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was a young man. It was hard to establish the Nasius, and there was a need I'm just giving that to explain what's going to happen this morning. There was a need to really strengthen the office of the Nasi, and all the Tanoim who are in this Gemara were motivated by that same desire. On both sides of the fence over here, we'll see they were motivated by that same desire to strengthen the Nasius, to make the Nasius into a stronger body. So it says Reb Shimon ben Gamliel in that time was the Nasi. Reb Meir Chacham. Reb Meir was the Gadol Adar. Reb Nassan Av Bezdin. And Reb Nassan was the Av Bezdin. Ki have Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Hassam. When Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was there, have kaimi kuli alma mikamei. Everyone would stand up for him. But as well, when Reb Meir and Reb Nassan walked in, everybody would stand up for him. Reb Meir was the Gadol Adar, and Reb Nassan was the Av Bezdin. Now, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says it's not okay that there should be the same level of kavod for the Nasi as there is for the Av Bezdin and the Chacham Adar. There needs to be that the Nasi gets a certain extra level of kavod. Based on that, he made psakim that no one should stand up when the Nasi, when the Av Bezdin and the Chacham walk in. Now, this is all to strengthen the office of the Nasi, so that Klal Yisrael could have a kiyum, to allow Klal Yisrael to have a kiyum in their new galus. Now, what happens is Reb Meir and Reb Nassan walk in, and they see this new reality. They weren't there the day this psak was paskin. They walk in, they see this new reality, and they're very disturbed by it. And they say, why don't we, my Nevid, what should we do to remedy the situation? Namely, Gali Uktzin. Let's ask Reb Shimon ben Gamliel a kasha on the sugi of Uktzin. We know that he's not, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was still up and coming. He wasn't fully matured and graduated. He won't be able to answer this shayla. And then we'll say, Lemi Roy Lidrish, who's Roy to Darshan, is Yamal Kolti Lasi, someone who knows everything. But someone who only knows a few sugis here and there is not someone who's worthy to be in the leadership role. And then what will happen? Well, Reb Meir, you'll become the Nasi, and I'll become the Av Bezdin, and everything will run smoother. Now again, what they're demanding is that there should be a strong office. There should be a way to, Lemi Yamal, someone who knows everything. So it says, Rev Simai, I think, overheard them, and he realized what was going to happen. So he went where Reb Shimon Gamliel would usually sit and prepare shir, and he started loudly learning Uksim in the background. Reb Shimon Gamliel didn't want to tell him to be quiet. From there you have a good raya that you're not supposed to quiet someone down if they're learning loud. And Reb Shimon Gamliel, Belas Prairie, closed up whatever he was learning, and he listened to Reb Simai say shir on Uksim. And Reb Simai Mamish went through with each prat, back and forth, with the kashas, with the answers. The next day, Reb Shimon Gamliel gets the shir, and right away out the gate, Reb Meir, Reb Nassan start asking him kashas on Uktzin, which literally until a few hours ago he wouldn't have been able to answer. And Reb Shimon Gamliel was no fool, and he said, I see what happened over here. Ilav that I would have, prepared yesterday, I would have been mamish out of business over here. So he said, kick Reb Meir and Nassan out of his medrash. He threw them out of his medrash. So it says they were sitting, and Reb Meir and Nassan would be sitting outside the window and writing their kashas down on papers and throwing it in. And the Olam would try to answer it, and when they were able to answer it, good. If they couldn't, they'd throw it back out, and Reb Meir and Nassan would throw the answer in. Until finally the Olam inside got frustrated and said, the Torah is outside, and we're sitting inside. What's going on over here? So Reb Shimon Gamliel says, but last prayer we have to bring them back. We'll bring them back in, but what should I do? We're going to make a knas. He says, Reb Meir is not going to be called by his name. We're going to call him Acherim, and Reb Nassan is going to be called Yeshayimrim. That's the knas. And therefore in Mishnayos there's sometimes Yeshayimrim, there's Acherim. Now, it says like this. Here's the line that's relevant to us. At the end of the story, it says, Achvale b'chalmayu. Reb Meir and Reb Nassan both saw in a dream. Zilu faisiu. Go be mefayis of Shimon Gamliel. Reb Nassan azal, Reb Meir le'azal. Amar divrei chalaim is le'maylam le'miridin. Reb Nassan went to ask forgiveness because he said the chalaim told me what the right thing to do over here. And Reb Meir says no, divrei chalaim is le'maylam le'miridin. He stood with what he did. Now the Tajwid brings this as a raya of in practice. You see that when something was not an actual cheshmish b'dikadin, it was a toss up, and each person can pass it how he wants. Reb Meir felt chalaim is le'maylam le'miridin. Reb Nassan felt no, vices in the chalaim, they're showing me something important. Okay, we'll end with this. Everybody's invited.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.